Hi, I'm Georgia, and today I figured I would film the definitive ranking of all the books I've read so far in 2022. Hopefully I'll come up with a snappier title than that for actual YouTube. But I actually reached my Goodreads goal. I had a Goodreads goal of 35 books this year, which I know in like the grand scheme of like BookTok and BookTube, 35 books isn't all that impressive. But for somebody who works a full-time job and has horses and has lots of stuff to do, 35 I thought was a pretty decent sized goal. Turns out it's September now, but about a week ago, end of August, I hit that goal, which was crazy. And so now I've upped it to 55, which I think might be a bit ambitious, but we're going to see. But I figured I would do a ranking of all the books I've read so far and let you guys know what's worth it, what's not worth it. Also, this is like the beginning of my channel, so you guys can like get to know what kind of books I really enjoy and what I don't enjoy so much. And yeah, let's get into it. I really hope I'm able to like record my screen properly. I've never done like a screen recording video before, so fingers crossed this works. So this is my tiering system. We have at the very top the books that are going to be perfection, no notes, 5 stars, I love them, can't beat them kind of deal. Second, we have Gold Star, so they're books that I really enjoyed. Didn't quite reach that like 5-star perfect level, but you know what, I would recommend them. I really enjoyed them. Then we have You'll Do, the books that I read, and I was like, oh, that wasn't awful, but I didn't particularly enjoy it. Then we have Meh, books that I probably wouldn't recommend, but they weren't like objectively terrible books. And then at the very bottom we have God No, don't read these books, don't do it yourself, it's not worth it. So we're going to start with Gillian Flynn's Sharp Objects. I've actually now read all 3 of Gillian Flynn's books and they're all awesome. You can probably tell I'm like over the gold star. This is a gold star book. I wouldn't say it's perfect. If we're ranking Gillian Flynn books, it's Gone Girl at the very top, that would be perfection. Then we have Sharp Objects, and then we have the third one of Dark Places. They're both very good, Sharp Objects and Dark Places, but they're just not as good as Gone Girl. They're very dark, they're very well written. I feel like the characters are really well rounded. Sharp Objects in particular is so messed up. If you like a dark psychological thriller, you'll really enjoy these, but I can see why they would not be for everyone because they are a lot darker and a lot more gory than I remember Gone Girl being. Next up we have Loveless by Alice Oseman, which is 100% going into perfection. I did not expect to love this book as much as I did. I really enjoyed this. It's about a character called Georgia who goes to Durham University, and on her like journey of self-discovery, she figures out that she is asexual. She's not sexually or romantically attracted to anyone. And it's a book about that self-discovery, but also about platonic love and friendship love. And I just really enjoyed it. It is so heartwarming. It's quite a chunky book as well, and you really like get to fall in love with all the characters. And it has such a wonderful cast of queer characters as well, and I just love that book so much. Next up we have It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. Now, I do remember giving this 5 stars, and I stand by it. I do think it was a really good book, but is it on the same level for me as like Loveless and the other like perfection books I'm going to be talking about in this video? Probably not. So I'm going to put It Ends With Us in Gold Star. I really enjoyed this. I didn't think I would. I'm not a big fan of straight romance. Nothing about Colleen Hoover's books really like called to me. But I read Verity by Colleen Hoover and I really liked it. And then my best friend read It Ends With Us and was like, you have to read it. And she literally gave me the book and was like, read this book. So I did. And you know what? I really did like it. It's the story, I can't remember what the main character's called, Lily. She called Lily Bloom and she's a florist. I'm sure she's called Lily Bloom. She's got a really stupid name, whatever it is. And she basically gets in a relationship with this guy who ends up not being so nice to her, and is sort of interspersed with chapters from Lily's childhood or teenage years where she's dealing with her parents' abusive marriage, and I'm sure all kinds of trigger warnings for this book. And it's really beautifully written. I really enjoyed it, but I just don't think it's the same level as some of these other books I'm going to be talking about, so Gold Star is. Then we have The Perfect Girlfriend by Karen Hamilton, I think if I remember correctly. This is going to go in You'll Do. This is a psychological thriller about a woman who is stalking her ex-boyfriend essentially, and he's a pilot. She gets a job as an air hostess on the same airline as him, and things happen, and it's very, very creepy. It's written from the perspective of the stalker, so you kind of find yourself at points like agreeing with her because you're like seeing it through her eyes, and you're like, no girl, you like do deserve to like get your revenge on this guy, or like get this guy back, whatever it is she wants. I can't really remember the storyline, to be honest. Yeah, and I did enjoy it. It was really good. It's always really disconcerting when it's like written through the eyes of the villain, because you find yourself agreeing and you're like, oh, am I a horrible person? Maybe, but isn't that the point? Also, it's set in Reading, or part of it is set in Reading, which is really weird because I live in Reading and it's a crap hole. Nothing's ever set in Reading. Next up we have The Woman in Cabin 10 by Ruth Ware. This is going in God no. I've read a few Ruth Ware books and I always really enjoy them. This one just did not hit the mark for me. I did not enjoy this book in the slightest. It's about a woman who goes on like a cruise, but it's not really a cruise, it's just like a small boat, and she's there to like review it for her newspaper. She works as a journalist, and somebody ends up being thrown overboard and she sees it happen, and she goes to tell everyone that somebody's like been thrown overboard and has died, and nobody believes her. And it's about her like trying to figure out what's happened. Is she insane? And the premise of it is really good, but the execution is terrible. The way it ends is just not good. I didn't like the ending at all. A lot of the time with these psychological thrillers, even if like the journey is a bit weird, if the ending's really good, it can salvage it a little bit. But for this one, the journey was bad, the ending was bad. No. The Girl Before by J.P. Delaney. This is going in meh. It was fine. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but if somebody picked up, I wouldn't be like, don't read that, if that makes sense. This is set in London. It's about an architect. It's not about an architect. It's about a home, a super, super minimalist home that was designed by this architect, and he has a really strict set of rules as to who lives in this home. And the book follows the stories of two women who are like 2 years apart, like moving in to the house like separately of each other. The first one who moves in ends up dying, and it's up to the second woman to figure out what happened to the woman who lived there before her, why there are all these similarities between them, what's going on. Again, it's an okay premise. If I'd realised it was about like architecture and shit beforehand, I probably wouldn't have picked it up. It just didn't really interest me. But I have had friends read it and say they really liked it. So again, I think it is personal taste, but I just thought it was a bit dull. I didn't really like it very much. Love Murder by Saul Black. This is actually the sequel to one of my favourite psychological thrillers ever. This is a sequel to The Killing Lessons. Love Murder didn't quite do it for me. But actually no, I do actually quite remember enjoying it at the time I read it. But I'd forgotten I'd read it. Like I saw it on this list and I was like, oh yeah, I read that. I'm going to put it under You'll Do, but it's like a high You'll Do. This is following the same detective who was in The Killing Lessons, Valerie Hart. And she basically put away a serial killer many years ago, a female serial killer. And the female serial killer's sort of other half, like the partner in crime, never got caught. And now that partner in crime is contacting Valerie Hart to be like, you have to release, I can't remember what the serial killer's name is. Otherwise, I'm going to kill all these people. And it's about her searching for this person. It was okay. I think you do need to read The Killing Lessons to really understand the characters and the motives of this one. But yeah, I quite enjoyed it. I read it literally on the beach in Croatia. I went to Dubrovnik, and very much not a beach read. Not a beach read, but a good read. I am currently recovering from a horrible cold that I've had for like 2 weeks now, and I'm still quite nasally, so if I do sound horrible, please excuse me. Next up we have Her Every Fear by Peter Swanson. This is a solid meh. I wouldn't necessarily recommend this book, but was it awful? No. This is about a woman who's from London but swaps houses with her cousin who lives in Boston. And when she's there, she notices there's some weird things going on around the house. The neighbour ends up dying, and she's trying to figure out if her cousin was the one responsible or not. I enjoyed this didn't enjoy this, I suppose, because the main character is so similar to me. The main character suffers really badly with anxiety and claustrophobia, and so many of the things Peter Swanson wrote about I could like personally relate, to the point where I was like, are you in my head? But that didn't really add to my enjoyment of the book. It made me like kind of hate it a little bit, because I could like really like viscerally feel everything the main character in this was feeling. But also the storyline, it got a bit repetitive. You're basically seeing the same scenes from perspectives of like 3 or 4 different characters at some point. It got very repetitive, very samey. It was alright, it was fine. Who is messaging me? The Power by Naomi Alderman. This is a solid, God no, don't do it yourself. This is the worst book I've ever read. I hated this. It has a really good premise that draws you in and you like think it should be a really good book, and then it just, the execution is terrible. It's about a world in which women suddenly discover they have this basically electric zap kind of power, and they can kill men with like just the touch of a finger, and boy do they do that because they can. It's like advertised as a feminist novel, but it's just the opposite of a feminist novel. It basically concludes that if women suddenly got power, they would be exactly the same, if not worse, than men, and there's nothing good in this world and it's all hopeless. And I just failed to see the point of this book. You're basically looking at the perspectives of 4 different characters who all like had different backgrounds in life and stuff, and how they react to having these powers. And I didn't like any of the characters. One of the characters goes like weirdly religious and becomes like a god figure, which was so rogue. One of them is like a gangster and becomes like this gangster boss. It was really weird. I didn't like it at all. Did You See Melody by Sophie Hannah is definitely a gold star. I really enjoy Sophie Hannah books. She writes a thriller like no other. And this one is a really fun premise. It's not fun. It's literally the opposite of fun. But as like a reader, it's an interesting premise. It's about a woman from England who basically has had enough family and books a 2-week stay, I think it is, at this like all-inclusive resort in Arizona. When she arrives, she's sent to the wrong room, and when she goes in the room, there's a dad there with a young daughter, and she doesn't think anything of it at first, but as she goes through the holiday, she learns about the disappearance of a girl called Melody Happer, or I can't remember what the surname is, a girl called Melody, and she realises that the girl that she saw in that hotel room was Melody. What the hell is going on? How is Melody here? The weird thing is, Melody is presumed dead and both of her parents are currently in prison for her murder. What's gone on? You'll have to read it to find out. It's really good. Then we have Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Melinda Lowe. This is perfection. This book is so freaking good. If I could read this book for the first time again, I would die. It was amazing. This is a story of a character called Lily, and she is a teenager discovering that she is a lesbian in the 1950s at the same time as like the Red Scare and communism, and Lily is Chinese American, so she's got all this pressure on her to be like the perfect daughter from her parents, because if she puts a foot out of line, then that brings attention on her parents, who are Chinese immigrants, or I think they're actually 2nd generation, but like they're a Chinese family. And it's just about Lily figuring out who she is and what her place in the world is, because it was so much harder in the 1950s than it is now. You couldn't be openly lesbian. And this book is every bit as tragic and as horrible and heartbreaking as you think it is, but it's a beautiful, beautiful read. The Incendiaries by Aro Kwon. This is God no, don't waste your time. The plot of this sounds intriguing. You go into it thinking it's going to be about a North Korean cult, and it's not about that. I don't really know what it's about. I couldn't tell you. I read the whole thing. Couldn't really tell you what the storyline is. It follows 2 different characters. I think they're called Phoebe and Will, and Phoebe like gets involved in this cult, but like it doesn't really ever tell you why or what the cult is. And then Will is like trying to figure out why, but he can't figure it out, so you as the reader don't really know either. It's very odd. Just don't waste your time. It's not good. Normal People by Sally Rooney. Is this a meh or is this a God no? This is very controversial. People love Normal People. I didn't like it at all. But is it as bad as like The Power and The Incendiaries? I don't think it is. So for that reason alone, I'm going to put it in meh, which I think is higher praise than this book deserves. But hear me out. I hate the like miscommunication trope in books. I really, really hate it. And it's such like a straight romance trope that I find really, really, really frustrating. And Normal People is just set over 5 years of miscommunication. Just these 2 characters refusing to actually sit down with each other and be like, this is how I feel, how do you feel? Instead, like, one of them will do something completely innocent and the other one will read it the wrong way, and then they just, like, won't talk for 6 months. And it's so frustrating to read. I do not understand all the hype around this book. I just don't get it at all. I've had people try to explain it to me. I still don't get it. I don't understand why people love this so much. I tried to watch the TV series as well, and that made me even more angry. So, not the worst book I've ever read. I didn't like it. Also hated the lack of, like, quotation marks. Really weird. Speech marks, that's the word, not quotation marks, speech marks. Yerba Buena by Nina LaCour. This is one that I actually read really recently. This is, I'd kind of say it's like erring on like litfic, like literary fiction kind of vibes. And I'm not really a fan of litfic, but it's so beautifully written. It was sold to me as like a sapphic love story, and I'd say it is sapphic, like the plot is about 2 gay women, but that's not what the story is about. That's kind of like, that takes a back seat. It's mostly about these 2 characters coming to terms with the life that they've been dealt, and coming to terms with like grief and loss and figuring out their own places in the world. And it is just so wonderfully written. It's set in California, and these 2 characters, they don't even come together until like quite late in the book, which shocked me because I went into it thinking it was a sapphic romance. But I really recommend this. I do think it's a really beautiful book. Dolores by Lauren Amy Curtis. This is a short story about a girl who finds herself pregnant and ends up on the front steps of a nunnery, and she's taken in by the nuns, and it's about her experience at the convent and also her experience as a teenager, like what led her up to this point. Like I said, it is a short story, and if you enjoy short stories, you'd probably quite like it. I found it really lacked character development. You didn't really know why Dolores is the way she is. You don't know if the nuns even know she's pregnant. Like at the end of the book, she literally gives birth, which I don't think is a spoiler. I think it's quite obvious that's what like the book is leading up to. But even then, you don't know if the nuns were expecting her to give birth or not. It's very odd. It was alright. I think this is Lauren Amy Curtis's like first book. And for a first book, like the writing was really beautiful. I just didn't really get the storyline. But I think that is very much a personal opinion kind of thing. We have Haven't They Grown by Sophie Hannah. This is alright, like it'll do. It's not as good as some of the other Sophie Hannah books I've read. This is about a woman who goes to stalk one of her like old friends that she lost contact with many years ago, and upon stalking the friend finds that the kids haven't grown up. Her kids are still the same age as they were like 12 years ago when they last spoke, and she's like, how on earth is that possible? And the woman just becomes completely obsessed with it. Sorry, I can't remember the character's name. But she just becomes completely obsessed with why haven't these children grown? And it's like, is it something supernatural? Is there some sort of like explanation for this? Like how on earth they kept them the same age for 12 years? Really interesting premise. I feel like the execution wasn't fantastic. But you know what? I read it really quickly just because I wanted to get to the end and find out what happened. The ending, I found it slightly disappointing, but others said it's really good, so it'll do. It's fine. Written in the Stars by Alexandria Bellefleur. Is this a gold star or is this perfection? I don't know. Maybe like a high gold star? No. Yeah, we're going to go a high gold star. This is a sapphic romance between 2 characters who are just the complete opposite of each other, that old trope. And they end up pretending to be in a relationship just to like placate the people around them. And of course, they actually end up falling for each other. And it's just your very classic love story. I just really, really love the characters in this one. Like I really fell for the characters. That is a very loud plane going past. I just really like the characters in this, and if you want just like a sappy, sapphic romance love story written in the stars, is the one for you. I just really liked it. She's Too Pretty to Burn by Wendy Hurd. I think this will be a you'll do. I read this, I enjoyed it. Wasn't amazing, wasn't awful, very average. This is a sapphic retelling of The Picture of Dorian Gray. Not that I've ever read The Picture of Dorian Gray, but people tell me that's what it is. It's about two characters, Michaela and Mick and Veronica. Mick and Veronica are the characters, and they basically meet at like the end of summer. It's all like stuffy and hot, and they're teenagers who are bored, and they end up basically going out and causing havoc. And it's just about their like really rapid and weirdly underdeveloped love story, but also it's sapphic, so I enjoyed it anyway. And it's just about them getting in trouble and something terrible happens, and I don't want to say any more because it'll be a spoiler. It was alright. Delilah Green Doesn't Care. Perfection, 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 perfection. This book is my favourite book I've read all year. I love this book so much. Again, another sapphic romance. I've really been into sapphic romances the past couple of months. You've got a lot more coming, where that comes from. I just fell in love with this book and these characters so hard. I am just like 2 months on and I still think about Delilah Green every moment of every day. I love them. Delilah Green's just like really cool, independent photographer from New York City who goes back to her hometown of Bright Falls to photograph her stepsister's wedding, only she's been like pretty estranged from her family over the past few years, and when she arrives back in Bright Falls, she kind of falls for her stepsister's best friend, and it's about their relationship. It's also about all the characters as a whole. Like, all the characters in this book are so multidimensional. Even though it's not a particularly long book, you leave it feeling like you know them all so well. So there's Delilah, there's Claire, who she falls for, Astrid, her stepsister, there's her stepmum, whose name escapes me right now, there's Iris, who's the other friend of the friend group, and I just love them all so much. I want this to be made into a movie so bad. So this icon is actually for Paper Girls by Alex Smith, but I haven't read this book this year. This is the first book in the DCI Robert Kett series, and I've read books 6, 7 and 8 so far this year, but I just thought I'd do one icon to like encompass them all. So I'm going to put that under You'll Do. I have been reading the DCI Robert Kett series for a couple of years now. Every time there's a new book out, I will download it on my Kindle and I'll read it. I mostly read them in the bath. I always read my Kindle in the bath. They're just a really good police procedural book. Like, probably the best police procedural series that I've ever found. I've read quite a few. And the Kett series is my favourite one. They're quite dark. They're based in the UK. I always enjoy a police procedural that's based in the UK because I can like understand it more. And yeah, so if you're looking for a book like that or a series like that, I think there's currently 10 books. I've got to read 9 and 10. I do recommend this series. Paper Girls is the first one. Then we have The Catch by T.M. Logan. This is probably like a high meh. Maybe You'll Do. But I saw the icon there and I couldn't remember for the life of me what the story was about. So I'm going to put it in meh. I've read The Holiday by T.M. Logan and I really enjoyed that book. So when I saw this one for free on Kindle Unlimited, I was like, yes, let me try it. It was nowhere near as good as The Holiday. This is about a man who meets his daughter's new boyfriend, and he immediately is like, this guy is a criminal, he's a creep, don't like him, don't want him anywhere near my daughter. And you'll basically spend the whole book trying to figure out if this guy is just like a misogynist who doesn't want his daughter dating anyone, or if the boyfriend is genuinely like a serial killer creep. And it does keep you guessing, you do keep going back and forth, but it was forgettable. There's better books out there, I think. Next up we have Not My Problem by Kira Smith. I really enjoyed this. This is a gold star. This is basically like a teen rom-com sapphic book. It's just really silly and stupid, and it's the kind of book that when I was a teenager I would just really enjoyed. The main character is a lesbian, but it's not her like coming out story or her like desperately trying to like find out her place in the world. She just is a lesbian and that's who she is. The main storyline is that she has a really hard time at home, like her mum's an alcoholic and she has to like juggle all that, and then she's also juggling school and she really struggles in school, and then she basically starts to solve other people's problems in a way of like, she doesn't need to solve her own problems if she can solve everyone else's problems. And it's just based in a school and it's really silly and I really enjoyed it. Then we have Must Love Silence by Lucy Bexley, which is meh. This is another sapphic romance book. I can see where Lucy Bexley was trying to go with this, and I think this is actually her like debut novel, but the execution of it was quite poor. Like I said in my last review of this book, there were like certain things, like the lack of continuity was a big problem for me. I'd notice that the character would be like sipping from a cup of tea 1 second, and the next second the tea would just be like gone from their hand and they'd be doing something else. And it was something I really, really noticed throughout this book. I feel like good writing, you don't notice stuff like that. But in this one, I really did. I felt like there was a lack of character development. And I feel like the plot of it could be really good. So it's about a character who is basically agoraphobic. It never says that in so many words, but she's like essentially agoraphobic. Never ever wants to leave her apartment. And then one day she gets an offer. She films or records audiobooks for a living. One day she gets an offer to go record an audiobook in New York. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, I'm not agoraphobic anymore. It's fine. I can go to New York. And then she's in New York and she meets a woman, the author of the book, and they basically start doing it. It was fine, but it wasn't good. Fault Lines by Emily Atami. This was so different from the type of books I usually read, but I really enjoyed it, so I put it in, you'll do. This is about a Japanese housewife who is feeling like really stuck in this sort of dead-end life. Her husband doesn't pay her any attention, her kids are nightmares, and she just doesn't know what to do. She just wants to like live life a little bit. And then she meets a man and starts having an affair, but she realises that that doesn't solve all of her problems. Like, the core problems are within herself. That old cliche. And it's just a really, really good book. I don't usually read stuff like that, but I enjoyed it. It was alright. The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. I've seen so many mixed reviews of this one, but I finished reading it about 4 days ago and I really liked it, so I'm going to go for Gold Star. This is a book, I can see actually why it could be controversial. I think if you're not in the right headspace for a book like this, it could be potentially like really triggering. It's about suicide. But it's basically about a woman who tries to commit suicide but finds herself in something called the Midnight Library, where she can basically go through all of her regrets in life and then like go to all the different lives where if she'd like hadn't made that decision, this life you'd lead, or like her parallel lives essentially. And it was something I really needed. I've been having a bit of a crisis. Ever since the end of the pandemic, I just feel like so much of my life has been wasted by like lockdowns and all stuff like that. I feel like the prime years of my 20s, like it started when I was 25 and didn't really end until I was 27. So like I lost those prime years. And I've been really struggling to like make amends with that, or like make my peace with that. And I've been struggling a lot with having like regrets and missing out on things, and this book just put things in a completely different perspective for me, because without all those things I wouldn't be where I am now. So for that reason, this is a Gold Star book. Aristotle and Dante Dive into the Waters of the World. Another Gold Star. I'm very generous with my ratings, guys. Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe is one of my favourite books of all time. I love that. And this is the sequel to that. And I was scared. I was really scared because Aristotle and Dante hold such a special place in my heart. And I was like, if the sequel is bad, they'll be ruined for me forever. But the sequel, it was really good. It's basically about two boys in the 80s who are discovering their love for each other. They're discovering they're gay. And the first one... what is it called? Discover the Secrets of the Universe, that's it. I've got like a really fuzzy head for this cold, I'm really struggling. The first one is about them sort of like discovering their love for each other, and this one, Dive into the Waters of the World, is about them sort of growing into men. I really enjoyed it. If You Still Recognise Me by Cynthia So is another Gold Star. This is, again, a sapphic romance. Can you notice a theme? There's a big theme run through my books. This is about a character. What is her name? Wait a sec. Elsie. So this is the story of Elsie, who's got this massive crush on a girl who lives in New York. Elsie lives in the UK. And they met through the world of like fanfic. And this book, if you're like into like fanfic and you're in like fandoms and stuff, I feel like you would really love this book. Like me as a teenager in my like Girls Loud fandom, I would have died for this because it is exactly what I was like. I did find as an adult reading it, this is definitely like a young adult, I did find as an adult reading it, I like rolled my eyes a couple of points, but you can't judge a YA book on like being too young because that's what they are. So Elsie has this crush on Ada, and it's about her like trying to tell Ada and like figuring out how they'd work. And then one of Elsie's old friends comes back into the picture, and Elsie realises that maybe things don't have to be difficult at all, and that is all I'm going to say. We have Lonely Hearts by Lisa Gray. This is a series, the Jessica Shaw series, that I read on Kindle Unlimited. Whenever I see a new one in the series, I always get it on Kindle Unlimited. It's about a PI in, I'm sure it's California, who basically goes like from book to book solving different crimes that people come to her with, and I always really enjoy them. Like, they're really good. Again, not groundbreaking writing, like they're not anything particularly special, but they're just good, fun stories, and I like the characters in them, and I would enjoy if you like a sort of PI thriller. I Kiss Shara Wheeler by Casey McQuiston. Again, this is another you'll do. I love Casey McQuiston's writing. I've got One Last Stop to talk about in this video as well, but also Red, White and Royal Blue. I really enjoyed both of those. I Kiss Shara Wheeler didn't quite live up to the expectations I had after those two books, and I feel like that sort of like knocks it down a peg for me. Again, this is YA and the other books are more adult, so maybe I am viewing it through too much of an adult lens. But it's about a girl called Chloe who's got this massive rivalry with a girl called Shara Wheeler who's like in all her classes. And then one day Shara just kisses Chloe and then disappears, and Chloe's got to figure out where Shara's gone. It's cute, it's really cute, and I think as a teenager I would have really loved it, but as an adult I'm a bit like, meh, it was fine. Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. This book is a solid God no. I fought through this book. It was a battle and a half, and I must admit the only reason I finished it is because I did kind of want to know where the story was going, but wasn't worth the battle, honestly. I said in my original review of this I could see English lit teachers going mad over this, and it's really funny because I actually got like 3 or 4 different English lit teachers commenting me like, I love this book. So I think that says all you need to know. I just found it a bit pretentious. I didn't really understand the storyline. It's sort of a sci-fi dystopia, and it starts with these characters at school, and you can tell the characters are being like groomed for something, but you don't really know what they're being groomed for. You don't really find out. It never like explicitly says. It's only if you really like read between the lines that you figure out what's going on. It was too much hard work for my little brain. I just didn't get it, didn't like it. Sorry. One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston is going in perfection. This book, when I first did my review on it, I was like, yeah, it was alright, I'll give it 4 stars. But I think about this book all the time. Like, I reference this book so often. I talk to my friends about it all the time. And if that's not the sign of a book that you like really, really enjoyed, I don't really know what is. So that book is going in perfection. It's, again, a sapphic romance about the main character Autumn or August. I can never remember what her name is. And she basically meets a girl called Jane on the subway, but Jane, turns out, can't leave the subway, and she's actually from the past. And they're trying to figure out how to get Jane off the subway and why she's in 2022 when she's from the 70s, and it's really, really good. You'll Be the Death of Me by Karen McManus. That will go in like You'll Do, but it's like a high You'll Do, you know? I've read every single one of Karen McManus's books, and this is probably one of my least favourite ones. It's about a group of teenagers who are essentially trying to solve a murder, which is basically what all of her books are about. And if I was a teenager, I would love these books so much. I know I would have absolutely loved these books. And you know what, as a 28-year-old, I do still love these books. They're definitely like thrillers, but for teenagers. And finally we have The Girl Who Came Out of the Woods by Emily Barr. And again, I think this will be a you'll do. I've spoken about this book loads, but it's one of those books, I read like 80% of it and I was like, I have no idea what's going on. It's about a girl who basically lived in, I'm hesitant to say cult in the woods. It's like a matriarchal society in the woods in India. And one day everyone basically gets this plague and she is the only one who survives, and she comes out of the woods and has to live in regular society. And she struggles, and it's about her journey through that. But there's also a really weird sort of theme throughout the book of somebody locked in a basement. And I was reading it and I was like, why? Like, why are they locked in a basement? What's this got to do with any of the story? It's like trying to make this weird sort of like psychological twist on a book that doesn't need to be scary. And then at 80%, it all comes together, it all makes sense. And I was like, that is genius. So majority of the reading experience I didn't enjoy, but the end I really liked, so it goes up to a you'll do. So there you go, there is my definitive ranking of all 35 books I read so far this year. I hope that was thrilling for you as it was for me. Let me know, based on what you've seen here, what other books you think I should try. I have got a to read list, but you know what? It's not actually that long. I could do with adding a few more books to my to read list. So let me know. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, guys.